if you haven't heard of Samuel or taken a course with him, he has been our top instructor in project management field for a number of years now. Really 30 plus years in the industry with experience in consulting work, all things related to PMP design. And so we're privileged to have him with us today. And so, Samuel, if I can get these to advance, I will turn it over to you. And just a reminder for everyone else before we do turn it over to Samuel, there will be a recording of the webinar that is sent out in about a week from today's date. So you can look for that. If for some reason you have to jump off early or weren't able to attend the whole thing, you will get that in about a week, as long as your company for some reason hasn't opted out of corporate emails. But you should see that, like I said, within about 7 days. So Samuel, thanks for joining us. Go ahead and take it away.
Oh, excuse me. All right. Thank you, Luke. If you will make me the presenter, then I'll advance these and relieve you of that responsibility as
Sounds
we go
good.
forward.
I'm going to stop sharing and then you can share your screen.
All right, great. Then we'll get that. And there we go, folks. There. All right. So as we all know, the PMP exam is changing. Actually, both the PMP and the PMBOK are changing as of January 2nd, 2021. And while the changes happen about every 4 years, this particular change is going to be a big one. So as we go through the time together, we're going to take a look at the PMBOK and the new exam. We're going to look at how things are going to change. And of course, we just said when it will happen. And then I'll do my best to try to answer your questions along the way, or as you put them into the Q&A in the end. So the 6th edition of the PMBOK is our current PMBOK. And sometime after the first of the year, we'll see the 7th edition of the PMBOK come out. But until it does, the 6th edition is the one that is relevant to the PMP exam. And when PMI changed this exam, they intended to roll it out this past July, which would have meant it was relevant to the 6th edition, even though it was a big change in the content and focus of the exam. The PMBOK guide gets updated about every 4 years, and so we're due for a new PMBOK, and it will come out sometime in 2021, probably fairly early. Right? It is the primary source for the PMP exam, but it's not the only source. And with the changes to the exam, the other sources that we may need to draw upon, and certainly that we're going to need to study to get ready for the new exam, expands fairly dramatically. All right? And we'll take a look at that also as we go forward. Well, these changes are driven by a role delineation study that PMI did back in 2019, as I recall, right? And up until that role delineation study, every time PMI had done a role delineation study, they made some changes in the exam and in the PMBOK but they focused on the 5 basic performance domains that we've always considered: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. But with this latest role delineation study, that is changing. And instead of looking at those 5 performance domains, we're now down to only 3 performance domains: people, process, and business environment. And as you can see, most of the focus of the exam is on people and process. Business environments, only 8% of the questions we expect on the new exam. Whereas in the past, we've seen a lot of focus across all 5 domains, with the concentration being in planning, executing, and monitoring and controlling. Okay. The other thing that has changed is the way that our performance domains are defined or explained. We've had initiating, planning, etc., defined on the basis of tasks and knowledge and skill. But now we're defining them on the basis of tasks and enablers. And we're changing the emphasis in the questions on the exam from traditional approach to project management, which has historically almost always been predictive, to a focus on both the predictive and the adaptive. And we're rebalancing the questions on the exam from about a 90-10 predictive to adaptive balance to a 50-50 balance in those questions, which means those of us who are Scrum Masters, those of us who are Agile project managers, we're not going to have a whole lot of extra work to do. But those of us that have primarily managed projects in a predictive environment are going to have to bone up pretty significantly on Agile and the hybrid approaches that combine features from Agile and predictive approaches into some combination that works. Well, when we talk about domains, we're talking about high-level knowledge areas, high-level kinds of knowledge we need. Tasks give us a sense of what our responsibilities are within that area of knowledge. And of course, enablers then give us examples of the kind of work that we might need to do or focus on as part of that responsibility. Since we've reduced from 5 down to 3, we've got 14 tasks in the people domain, and among those 14 tasks, 53 different enablers, different examples. We've got 17 tasks and 61 examples for process, and 4 tasks with 19 examples for business environment. Now, I'm not going to walk us through each one at a time, but I am going to give you a quick highlight of those domains and tasks and enablers. So in the people domain, tasks, managing conflict, leading the team, supporting performance, empowering team members and stakeholders. And while we've always tried to make sure our team members and other stakeholders were engaged appropriately, this focus on empowering them is really a reflection of some of that additional agile influence. And so a couple of examples of enablers as we look across here. Leading the team, inclusion, supporting and addressing our differences, diversity. Excuse me. And I will go ahead and finish apologizing for my coughing. This is my worst allergy season of the year, and it's always worse when it's cold. And in North Carolina right now, it's cold. At least it's cold from a North Carolinian's point of view. So I'm sorry for the throat clearing and coughing that you may have to endure. Servant leadership is the basic leadership approach from Agile. And with the added emphasis, again, we see that showing up in examples, okay, of the enablers for the particular task leading the team. Empowerment, organizing around the strengths, okay, of our team members, and making sure that team members have an appropriate level of authority for making decisions that affect the work that they are expected to do. And again, coming out of the Agile emphasis we're seeing in the new PMBOK and on the exam. Right? From our process domain, making sure that we deal with the urgency in the execution of our project so that it aligns with the urgency of the need the business has for the value the project is delivering. This is also where we worry and focus on managing communication and risk. And our process domain is the focus on establishing our governance structure, establishing how we're going to manage our project. Okay. And this is our focus on artifacts. All of those documents and communication that need to be done to effectively manage and deliver successfully in our project. Not surprisingly, for managed communication, analyzing communication requirements of our stakeholders and making sure that we communicate in ways that both enable the message to be delivered effectively, but also allow feedback to be delivered so we can confirm that it's understood. Well, that's not new. We've always needed to do that. Okay. But we've also are seeing not more emphasis, but clearer emphasis on the importance of closing and the fact that closing occurs incrementally throughout the life of the project, not just at the end of the project, and that for that to happen, the team in the next phase or the customer in the end has to be ready to receive the transfer of results, end product, etc. Business environment only gets about 8% of the questions on the test. But the point in business environment is to make sure that we are focused on and understanding the larger business context for our project. How do we make sure that we know and we comply with the requirements, internal and external, legal, regulatory, etc.? How do we make sure that the benefit we intend can be realized? Since particularly for most of our projects, all of the benefit expected from the project by the organization, by the business, isn't going to get realized and delivered by the time the project's over. There is additional benefit that is expected from the project going forward after the project's over. How do we make sure that's delivered? How do we make sure that there's ways of determining that and that others know those ways of doing it, realizing it, evaluating it? And then it's additional emphasis, it's not new, but under business environment, supporting organizational change. And this is added recognition that projects are the vehicles of change for organizations. And that as we manage our projects, it will require not only project management skills, but also require organizational change management skills from us as project managers. Well, as mentioned, the focus on servant leadership is new in our people domain, but now we've always recognized we might need to do training as part of our project, but now there is added emphasis on not only doing it, but on demonstrating its effectiveness, measuring our training outcomes, added emphasis on knowledge management and the transfer of knowledge, as you can see. And on the psychology of working with stakeholders, added emphasis on paying attention to our stakeholders in terms of their motivators, their preferred leadership and communication styles, their emotional intelligence, and ensuring that we understand emotional intelligence and practice it consistently. And you can see, you follow this link, you can get a nice map that PMI put together that shows you the content of the old exam versus the content of the new exam, what has crossed over and is included from the old, and what's been added to the new. In our process domain, again, process to help us in that attention to our stakeholders in terms of their personality, those leadership, communication, style preferences, and so forth. We've also got the added emphasis on coordination between the project and other projects or the program or the portfolio, and even coordination with operations. Okay. And then a lot new in the business environment domain. Okay. Determining what kinds of compliance are going to be required. What could interfere with or prevent us from complying? And what happens if we don't comply? So, as project managers, we need to make sure we know the standards, the laws, the regulations, and so forth, and that we know the consequences of not fully complying with them. And we build that in to our approach to our project, both in terms of our risk analysis and in terms of our plans for compliance. Okay. We also need to think about how we're going to measure what we deliver, the value of it, and demonstrate that the organization's gotten the kind of benefit that they were looking for. And we've got to do it in a way that fits the culture of the organization. And if we're working with an external customer, that means in a way that fits the culture of the performing organization as well as the customer organization. Now, historically, there's been a recommended study list for us. You can get the entire list, this is not it, at this link. But you notice here the PMBOK, but also PMI's Agile Practice Standard, Kerzner's systematic approach, which has frankly, I think got my PMP 20 years ago now, and it was a recommended study source back then. Okay. But we've also got lots of others focused on Agile, okay, that you're going to want to make sure you study, because you could get questions about any of those various Agile approaches. Scrum, disciplined Agile, extreme, any of those could be referenced in questions or answer sets on the exam. Well, we know that this test, the current test, ends at midnight, December 31st, which means if you want to try to get it done before the test changes, you've got a very short window of opportunity left open. When you apply to take your PMP, they will give you a year to get around to taking the test, and they will give you 3 shots at passing that test. But if you try to take it and you fail it, and then you cannot try again until after January 2nd, 2021, you'll be taking the new test, even though you studied for the old test. So December 3rd is in December 7th, maybe, but early December is about as late as you want to wait if you want to make sure that your retake, if you need it, will be the same test that you took the first time. So very short window of opportunity. PMI has, however, in the midst of COVID, created the opportunity for us to take this exam online. You can specify if you prefer to take the exam online or from a test center, Pearson VUE Test Center, when you schedule your exam. If you take it online, it is a live proctored exam, which means you need video capability and you need to be able to move that camera around to give a 360-degree tour of the room where you're going to be sitting to take the test. And unlike the old days, instead of getting physical paper and pencil for scratch paper to work out calculations, draw network diagrams, etc., now you get an online calculator, which we've gotten for years and years. But instead of scratch paper, you get an online whiteboard. Excuse me. All right. So as you study for the exam, go to Pearson VUE and download their whiteboard tool, or find yourself a whiteboard tool so you can get used to making notes, drawing network diagrams, working calculations out on the whiteboard. And PMI has added a 10-minute break that occurs halfway through. So 2 hours in, you get a break, 10 minutes. If you're in the proctored approach, you can get up and move around, get out of the proctor's view. But when you come back, you cannot go back and look at any of the questions that you answered in the first half, because the proctor doesn't know if you went off and looked through all your notes before you came back for the second half. So just keep that in mind. And that pretty much gets us to Q&A. And I see we've got several questions and answers and a few chats. So let's see what I can tell you here and go back to the top.
Yeah, Samuel, let me just break in if you don't mind.
Sure.
Several have asked about the presentation itself. I know a recording of this will go out in about a week to everyone. Do you happen to know? I know with some presentations, we're actually able to send out a PDF of the presentation. Do you know if for this one that will be a possibility?
I do not know for sure.
Okay, I'm following up on that. I should have an answer here in the next few minutes. I just wanted to ask you as well.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, um, I'm old and my memory is limited, and I don't remember the answer to that question from previous times we've
no,
done this.
no problem. So as you can see there from Gilbert, compliance is a very broad topic. Can you speak more specifically about what you mean when you're talking about compliance in relation to the PMP?
All right. Well, in relation to the exam, compliance uh, is very broad. It's intentionally, I think, probably very broad, and it is getting at compliance with both any internal or external standards, requirements, regulations, laws, and so forth that are relevant to the project that you're doing. Okay? I mean, quick example, uh, I am outside of Global Knowledge, uh, partnered with my oldest son to establish a craft brewery. And so as I work with him to get that brewery up off the ground, uh, the issues of compliance revolve around the Tax and Trade Bureau compliance issues at the federal level, the alcoholic beverage control regulations and standards and permitting requirements at the state level, and the health department regulations for food safety at both the federal and state levels.
Okay, thank you for that, Samuel. A few more questions, and folks, let me just remind you, if you could put your questions that you do have in the Q&A box, that would be helpful as we're reading those off for Samuel. Another question here, Samuel, what happens if you fail the old exam once and then the new exam twice? Do you have to reapply? Are you barred for certification? Any light that you can shed there?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. And whether it's the old exam and then the new exam, or even the old exam 3 times failed, you have to wait a year and then you have to reapply, and you basically start over again. And when you are reapproved, you then get 3 more shots at trying to pass.
Perfect. And Samuel, if you don't mind, there were a few links that folks have been asking about, and especially if the answer comes back that they'll get the recording but not the presentation with some of the helpful links. Would you be able to pop some of those into the chat panel, the link itself? I see specifically where there was a question about what the link is to the whiteboard at Pearson View. And then I know the map that you had shown was helpful for folks. They were hoping to see some of those. Would you be able to punch those into the chat?
Absolutely. Um, let's see. So there's the link for the study materials. And Luke, if you want to go ahead with another question while I back up and find these links, and I'll drop
Sure.
them in here.
Perfect. Yeah, so one of the questions was, do you happen to know when the exam will fully convert from referencing any 6th edition material?
Given that the 7th edition is due out sometime early this year, or next year rather, and that's when the conversion in the test has been changed to. I suspect that January is going to be pretty much a clean break for us from the old test to the new.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Looking here to see if we have any other questions that have come in. Lots of questions regarding links, so it's great, folks. You can check the chat panel and take advantage of the links that Samuel's putting in there now. And if you have any last questions, feel free to type those in, and we'll address those in the few minutes that we have left.
Yep. And I'm getting your crossover map in. There we go.
Samuel, another question here regarding the PMBOK. Will there be a new PMBOK or no?
Yes, there will be a new PMBOK. It will be version 7. And like I said, it should be coming out early in the new year. But I don't have a date for you for its release off the top of my head.
Okay.
Right. And for those of you looking for the links, you probably have to scroll back up in the chat window.
Oh, and you know what, Samuel? What I'm seeing here, it looks like it went to all the panelists. You would just need to switch that there to all attendees as well.
Yeah.
They're coming, folks.
Yep. Sorry about that, folks. There we go. Didn't even notice. All right. So there's one of them. Here's the other one. And then the Pearson view. There it is.
Great. And if you want to advance, Samuel, I'll allow folks to type in any last minute questions, and then I would just wanted to make them aware of just the loads of resources that we have on our website. I believe we have a slide that speaks to that. And then also we want to make it as easy as possible for people to get the training, especially the project management training, agile training that they're looking for in prepping for this certification. And so just for attending today's webinar, with these courses that you see there, the project management profession, the PMP Bootcamp, we're going to offer 25% off of that course for anyone that attended today's webinar. So on that next slide, Samuel, there's this webinar promo code You can use Webinar 25, or if you currently have an account manager here at Global Knowledge, say you've taken a course with us in the past, you can reference this. We'll have record of your attendance, and we'll be glad to get you into that boot camp for 25% off. And it doesn't have to be just the PMP. If there's another course that you're looking to take, we'll get you in there for that discounted rate. So be sure to visit the website. There's just a load of resources, case studies, lots of really helpful stuff, in addition to the upcoming webinars that we'll be putting on, not only the rest of this month, but throughout the rest of this year. So thank you for attending today. Samuel, I'll just look and see if we have any last second questions, but again, thank you for walking us through this, and we appreciate your time. Any last question that you have for Samuel? I'll take that as a no, and we'll give you 14 minutes back on your day, unless you had any last words, Samuel.
Nope, I appreciate your time, attention. Thank you for your tolerance with my technical difficulties trying to get in when we started, and good luck with it. I'll be happy to see you in a class sometime in the near future and help you get ready.
Great. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you all. Have
All
a
right.
great rest of your day and evening.
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate your help.
Thanks, Samuel. Bye now.
Bye-bye.